Behind the pimps, fur coats, and funky soundtrack of this blaxploitation classic lies a production so wild it rivals the on-screen drama, from toilet paper screenplays and gangland murders to Black Panther deals and actors attacking producers with sock weapons. Fact 1. Script written on prison. Toilet paper. The origin story of the Mack is almost too bizarre to believe, but according to director Michael Campus, the original screenplay was actually written on prison toilet paper by an inmate named Robert J. Poole, who was serving time at San Quentin State Prison in California. This unusual writing surface has become one of the most talked about pieces of Hollywood legend, transforming a desperate act of creativity into one of cinema's strangest production tales. Poole, who had been convicted and sentenced to 5 years behind bars, reportedly wrote what various sources describe as anywhere from a 30 to 50-page treatment for the film on rolls of penitentiary toilet paper, because that was simply the material he had available to him while incarcerated. The exact details of what crime landed Poole in San Quentin remain somewhat unclear across different sources, though many accounts suggest he had been involved in the very lifestyle he was writing about, working as a pimp in Oakland before his imprisonment. What makes this story even more remarkable is that Poole managed to get his toilet paper manuscript out of prison and into the hands of people who could actually turn it into a real movie. The treatment, which was variously titled Black is Beautiful and the Mack and His Pack, according to different accounts, eventually made its way to producer Harvey Bernhard and the creative team that would bring it to life. While the finished film went through extensive rewrites by Max Julien, Richard Pryor, and director Michael Campus, the core story that would become one of blaxploitation's most influential films began its journey scrawled on the humblest of materials in a California prison cell. Fact 2. Real pimp murdered during production. The production of The Mack took a dark and violent turn when Frank Ward, the real-life Oakland pimp who had inspired the film's main character Goldie, was murdered approximately halfway through filming in October of 1972. Ward was shot and killed while sitting in his idling Rolls-Royce along with a female acquaintance, turning the movie set into something that felt as dangerous as the world being depicted on screen. Ward had been absolutely essential to the production, not just as inspiration for the story, but as an active participant who provided the filmmakers with protection, guidance, and access to film in his territory throughout Oakland. Director Michael Campus had met Ward while staying in Oakland for 2 months before filming began, and the charismatic pimp had agreed to let the crew shoot in areas he controlled in exchange for appearing in the film and receiving payment for his help. Ward had also supplied all the authentic extras for the movie, including the actual homeless people, drug users, pimps, and prostitutes who appear throughout the film, giving it a level of street authenticity that few other movies of the era could match. After his death, speculation immediately arose that the Black Panther Party might have been responsible for the killing, especially given the tensions that had existed between Ward and the Panthers during filming. The filmmakers and cast were forced to relocate to safer areas to complete production, and the entire atmosphere on set changed dramatically. The film ultimately included a dedication to Ward in its opening credits that reads, "In memory of a man, Frank D. Ward," serving as a somber reminder of the very real dangers that surrounded the making of this controversial movie. Fact 3. Black Panthers threw bottles from rooftops. Filming The Mack in Oakland meant navigating some seriously dangerous territory, and the production crew quickly discovered they weren't welcome in Black Panther-controlled areas when party members began throwing glass bottles and trash cans down from rooftops onto the film set below. The attacks created a tense and potentially deadly situation that threatened to shut down production entirely, forcing producer Harvey Bernhard to negotiate directly with the Black Panther Party's leadership to find a solution. The filmmakers reached out to Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, the co-founders of the Black Panther Party, to broker a deal that would allow filming to continue safely in Oakland neighborhoods. The initial payment that the production team sent to the Panthers as part of this arrangement actually bounced, which only made matters worse and led to even more aggressive harassment from the rooftops until a legitimate check could be delivered. Eventually, an agreement was reached that satisfied both parties and allowed the movie to move forward without constant fear of injury from falling debris. As part of this deal, Newton and Seal were put in charge of providing extras for the film, which meant that many of the people who appear in crowd scenes and background shots were actual Black Panther Party members or individuals connected to the organization. This arrangement also included a financial component that went beyond just the initial payment, as the producers agreed to donate all the proceeds from the film's opening week in Oakland to the Black Panther's free breakfast program for children, which was one of the party's most important community initiatives at the time and helped feed thousands of kids in underserved neighborhoods. Fact 4. Pryor's sock full of ball bearings attack plan. Richard Pryor's volatile behavior during the production of The Mack nearly resulted in a violent assault on producer Harvey Bernhard that could have derailed the entire film and possibly landed the comedian in serious legal trouble. According to Max Julian, who revealed this story during the DVD commentary for the film, Pryor and Bernhard got into a heated argument on set that escalated to the point where both men were furious with each other and the situation seemed impossible to resolve peacefully. Later that same night, after the confrontation, Pryor armed himself with a sock that he had filled with ball bearings, creating a makeshift weapon that could cause serious injury, and headed toward Bernhard's hotel room with the intention of attacking the producer. Ball bearings in a sock essentially turn into a flexible club that can deliver devastating blows while being easy to conceal and carry, making it a particularly dangerous improvised weapon. Fortunately for everyone involved, Julian managed to intercept Pryor before he reached Bernhard's door and spent time talking his friend and co-star down from his rage, convincing him that attacking the producer would only make everything worse and potentially destroy both the film and Pryor's career. Director Michael Campus later described working with Pryor as extremely difficult, noting that the comedian would frequently arrive on set high on drugs or sometimes wouldn't show up at all, creating constant scheduling problems and tension throughout the production. Despite all these behind-the-scenes conflicts and Pryor's unpredictable behavior, his performance in the finished film turned out remarkably well, and Campus admitted he was genuinely surprised by how effectively Pryor's scenes came together on screen. Fact 5. Producer initially banned. Prior over-urination incident, producer Harvey Bernhard was strongly against casting Richard Pryor in The Mack and fought hard to keep him off the project because of the comedian's already notorious reputation for outrageous and unprofessional behavior in Hollywood. According to Max Julian in the DVD commentary, Bernhard had serious concerns about bringing Pryor onto the production, based on stories that had circulated throughout the film industry about his wild conduct on previous movie sets. The most infamous incident that made Bernhard hesitant involved Pryor's work on the 1968 film Wild in the Streets, where he allegedly urinated on legendary actress Shelley Winters during production, an act that solidified his reputation as someone who was difficult and unpredictable to work with. This wasn't just some minor rumor or exaggeration either, as the story had become well known enough in Hollywood circles that it followed Pryor from project to project and made producers nervous about hiring him despite his obvious talent. Bernhard's concerns turned out to be completely justified based on how Pryor behaved during the filming of The Mack, creating constant problems and nearly assaulting Bernhard himself at one point. However, Max Julian, who was not only starring in the film but also heavily involved in writing and shaping the script, insisted that Pryor play the role of Slim and wouldn't back down from that demand. Julian believed that Pryor's talent and authentic understanding of the street life they were portraying was essential to making the film work, and he ultimately convinced Bernhard to take the risk despite all the red flags surrounding Pryor's behavior and past incidents on film sets. Fact 6. Film outgrossed The Godfather in select cities. The Mack managed to achieve something almost unbelievable when it was released in 1973, as director Michael Campus claimed that his low-budget film about an Oakland pimp actually outgrossed The Godfather in the specific cities where both movies were playing at the same time. This is particularly remarkable considering that The Godfather had been released just 1 year earlier in 1972 and had become the highest-grossing film of all time up to that point, eventually earning between $250 and $291 million at the box office. The Mack was distributed in a completely different way than most major studio films, as distributors made the deliberate choice to avoid theaters in predominantly white neighborhoods because they believed the movie would perform much better in black communities. The film ended up playing in approximately 20 theaters total, almost exclusively in black neighborhoods, which gave it an incredibly limited release compared to wide mainstream releases that would play in hundreds or thousands of theaters across the country. Despite this tiny distribution footprint, the movie drew massive crowds in the areas where it did play, with audiences connecting deeply to the authentic, street-level storytelling and the raw portrayal of life in Oakland that felt genuine rather than exploitative. The fact that a $250,000 independent film could compete with and even beat one of the most successful movies ever made in head-to-head competition, even in limited markets, speaks to how powerfully the Mack resonated with its target audience and how underserved that audience had been by mainstream Hollywood at the time. Fact 7. 2 completely different musical scores. The Mack exists with 2 completely different musical scores that give the film entirely distinct feels depending on which version you watch, creating an unusual situation where the same movie has 2 official soundtracks separated by a decade. The original 1973 release featured a funky soul score, composed and performed by Willie Hutch, a Motown Records artist and producer, whose music perfectly captured the style and atmosphere of early 1970s street culture. This original soundtrack became beloved by fans and was later sampled extensively by hip-hop artists, cementing its place in music history. However, in 1983, Producers Distributing Corporation decided to reissue the film to take advantage of Richard Pryor's massive resurgence in popularity and the fact that co-star Roger Mosley had become a household name through his role on the hit television series Magnum P.I. For this re-release, the distributors made the controversial decision to commission an entirely new score from composer Alan Silvestri, who would later become famous for scoring major films like the Back to the Future trilogy and Forrest Gump, with vocals provided by Gene McDaniels. The reissue poster advertised that a soundtrack album would be released on Posh Boy Records, but it actually came out on the ALA Enterprises label and has since become extremely rare and collectible. Fans began referring to this alternate version as the Mack and His Pack, based on a catchphrase used on the reissue poster to distinguish it from the original. When the film was first licensed for home video release through Embassy Pictures, it included the Silvestri score, but the later New Line DVD release restored Willie Hutch's original music to the film. Fact 8. Premiere Proceeds funded Black Panther's breakfast program. As part of the complex deal that allowed the Mack to film safely in Oakland's Black Panther-controlled territory, the producers agreed to donate all the proceeds from the film's opening week in Oakland to the Black Panther's free breakfast program for children, turning the movie premiere into a major fundraiser for one of the organization's most important community initiatives. The free breakfast program was one of the Black Panther Party's most celebrated and impactful social programs, providing hot meals to thousands of children in underserved neighborhoods across the country who might otherwise have gone to school hungry. This program had started in Oakland in 1969 and quickly expanded to cities nationwide, serving an estimated 20,000 children daily at its peak and becoming one of the party's most visible efforts to directly improve conditions in Black communities. The financial arrangement meant that when the Mack opened in Oakland theaters, every ticket sold during that crucial first week went directly to feeding kids rather than into the pockets of the producers or distributors, representing a significant sacrifice given that opening week revenues are typically among the most profitable for any film release. The movie turned out to be a box office hit in Oakland, which made the donation even more substantial and helped fund meals for countless children in the area. This fundraising premiere represented an unusual intersection of Hollywood entertainment and community activism, showing how the producers had to navigate not just the artistic and business challenges of making a controversial film, but also the political and social realities of filming in a neighborhood where powerful community organizations had real control over what could and couldn't happen. Fact 9. Real Players Ball. Filmed with actual pimps. One of the most memorable and iconic sequences in the Mack is the Players Ball scene, where pimps gather to show off their finest clothes and compete for the title of Pimp of the Year. And this scene wasn't created on a Hollywood soundstage with actors pretending to be pimps, but was actually filmed at a real Players Ball event in Oakland with genuine participants from the underground community. The Players Ball was an actual tradition where pimps from across Oakland would dress up in their most extravagant outfits, complete with elaborate fur coats, oversized hats, and custom jewelry, to compete for recognition and status within their world. The filmmakers gained access to this authentic gathering and simply set up their cameras to capture what was already happening, giving the scene a level of documentary-style realism that would have been impossible to recreate with hired actors. The attendees at this real event were actual working pimps who brought their own wardrobes, their own attitudes, and their own genuine interactions to the screen, making every moment feel completely authentic rather than staged or choreographed. This footage became one of the film's most influential sequences and helped inspire actual Players Ball events that would be held in cities like Chicago starting in 1974, essentially turning the movie's depiction of this gathering into a real annual tradition that continues to this day. The scene has been parodied and referenced countless times in other films and television shows, including spoofs in movies like I'm Gonna Get You Sucka and on Dave Chappelle's show, cementing its place as one of the most culturally significant moments in blaxploitation cinema history. Fact 10. Director shot controversial scene. Behind Stars Back. Mack's Julia, who starred in and helped write The Mack, discovered that director Michael Campos had filmed a scene without his knowledge that Julianne found deeply offensive and has regretted being associated with ever since. The scene in question showed one of the racist white cops in bed with a large black woman, and Julianne only learned about it after Campos had already shot the footage behind his back while Julianne wasn't on set. When Julianne confronted Campos about why he had filmed this scene without telling him, the director explained that he wanted to show the character as decadent and hypocritical, revealing that even a racist cop couldn't resist his attraction to black women. Julianne found this explanation even more offensive than the scene itself, because Campos had specifically chosen an actress based on her race and her larger body size to represent decadence, essentially using those physical characteristics as shorthand for moral corruption or deviance. The actress who appeared in the scene was Norma McClure, and according to accounts from the production, she was not acting or pretending to be uncomfortable during the filming because she genuinely did not enjoy doing the scene and her discomfort was real. To this day, Julianne has stated in interviews and DVD commentaries that this one scene remains his only regret about the entire film, feeling that it crossed a line and reinforced negative stereotypes in a way that undermined the more thoughtful social commentary the movie was trying to make about race, power, and exploitation in America during the early 1970s. Fact 11. Actress fled to Kentucky after Ward's murder. Carol Speed, who played the prostitute character Lulu in The Mack and delivered one of the film's most memorable performances, had developed a personal relationship with Frank Ward during the production, and his brutal murder in October of 1972 left her so deeply traumatized that she felt she needed to get as far away from Oakland and the West Coast as possible. Speed's connection to Ward went beyond just working with him on the film, and when he was shot and killed in his Rolls-Royce along with a female companion, the violence and danger that had been lurking around the production suddenly became terrifyingly real for her. The actress was so shaken by Ward's death and fearful for her own safety that she made the decision to leave California entirely and accepted a role in a low-budget horror film being shot in Kentucky just to have a reason to flee the area and put thousands of miles between herself and the dangerous world she had been immersed in. The film she escaped to was called Abby, a 1974 blaxploitation horror movie that was essentially a low-budget ripoff of The Exorcist, featuring a story about demonic possession that replaced the white Catholic family of the original with a black family, dealing with an African sex demon. While Abby wasn't exactly a prestigious project and was made on a shoestring budget, it gave Speed the opportunity to work in a completely different environment, far from Oakland and the violence that had claimed Ward's life, allowing her to process the trauma of what had happened while staying busy with another film role. Fact 12. Tarantino couldn't find Julian for Pulp Fiction. Quentin Tarantino, who has always been a massive fan of the Mack and blaxploitation films in general, wanted Max Julian to audition for the role of Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction during the early 1990s. But the director and his team were completely unable to track down the reclusive actor who had essentially disappeared from Hollywood. Julian's career never took off the way it should have after the Mack, despite his obvious charisma and screen presence, and he gradually faded from the industry rather than becoming a major star alongside other black action heroes of the era like Fred Williamson and Richard Roundtree. By the time Tarantino was casting Pulp Fiction in the early 1990s, Julian had become so removed from the Hollywood system that nobody seemed to know where he was or how to contact him, making it impossible for the production to even extend an audition offer. According to Samuel L. Jackson, who revealed this story in an interview, Julian would have flat out refused the role anyway because of one particularly infamous scene in the film involving Marcellus Wallace, Bruce Willis's character Butch Coolidge, and the Gimp in the basement of the pawn shop. Jackson noted that Julian, who had built his reputation playing the coolest pimp in cinema history, simply wasn't going to participate in that kind of scene, saying he's the Mack, and suggesting that the role would have been beneath the dignity of someone with his iconic status in the blaxploitation world. The role ultimately went to Ving Rhames, who delivered a powerful and memorable performance that became one of Pulp Fiction's most talked-about elements. Fact 13. All extras supplied by Real Gangster. Frank Ward's involvement in the Mack went far beyond just inspiring the main character and providing protection for the film crew, as he personally supplied every single extra who appeared in the movie's street scenes, including all the homeless people, drug addicts, pimps, and prostitutes who populate the film's gritty Oakland backdrop. Ward had deep connections throughout Oakland's underground community and controlled significant territory in the city, which gave him access to the real people who lived the lifestyle that the movie was attempting to portray on screen. Rather than hiring professional actors or recruiting community members through traditional casting calls, the filmmakers simply allowed Ward to bring in people from his actual world, ensuring that every face in the crowd and every person hanging around on street corners was someone who genuinely lived that life. This arrangement gave the Mack a level of street authenticity that would have been impossible to achieve through normal Hollywood casting methods, as these weren't actors pretending to be homeless or pretending to be sex workers, but actual individuals from those communities who brought their real experiences and genuine presence to the screen. The decision to use Ward's connections for extras meant that the film captured the true look, feel, and atmosphere of Oakland's underground scene in the early 1970s, with background performers who knew exactly how to carry themselves and interact because they were simply being themselves rather than playing characters. This casting approach was part of what made the Mack feel so different from other blaxploitation films of the era and contributed to its lasting influence on hip-hop culture and urban cinema. Fact 14. Pryor wrote his own dialogue in all-night sessions. Richard Pryor insisted on writing all of his characters' dialogue for the Mack and made this a non-negotiable condition of his participation in the film, leading to marathon all-night rewriting sessions where he would work intensively on crafting authentic street language for his role as Slim. Pryor brought a level of insider knowledge to the project that neither Max Julian nor director Michael Campus could match because he had grown up in Peoria, Illinois, in a brothel run by his grandmother with a father who was a pimp, giving him direct personal experience with the lifestyle and culture being depicted in the film. This painful and complicated childhood had left Pryor with deep emotional scars, but also gave him an understanding of the pimp world that came from lived experience rather than observation or research. The all-night writing sessions became a regular part of the production process, with Pryor hosting these intensive creative meetings where he would draw from his memories and knowledge to create dialogue that felt completely authentic and true to the way people in that world actually spoke. Many of the most memorable and quotable lines from the Mack came directly from Pryor's contributions, including ideas that he took from real people he had known while growing up, such as the story about putting a man in the trunk of a car with rats and forcing a drug dealer to stab himself at gunpoint. The infamous Players Ball sequence was largely Pryor's idea as well, showing how much his creative input shaped the final film beyond just his performance as Slim. Effective 15. Film cost only $250,000 to make. The entire production of the Mack was completed for the remarkably low budget of just $250,000, which is an astonishingly small amount, considering everything the filmmakers had to deal with during the shoot and everything that appears on screen in the finished film. This budget had to cover filming across multiple locations throughout Oakland, paying the cast and crew for several months of work from early September through late December of 1972, creating or acquiring all the elaborate pimp costumes with their fur coats and oversized hats, and navigating the incredibly dangerous territorial disputes with both Frank Ward's criminal organization and the Black Panther Party. To put this budget into perspective, The Godfather, which was released just 1 year earlier, cost somewhere between $6 and $7 million to produce, meaning the budget for the Mack was less than 4% of what it cost to make that film. The filmmakers managed to stretch this tiny budget by using real locations instead of building sets, relying on Frank Ward to provide authentic extras from his territory rather than hiring professional actors, and having the pimps who appeared in the Players Ball sequence bring their own elaborate wardrobes rather than renting or creating costumes. Despite these financial limitations, the film looks and feels like a much more expensive production thanks to the authentic street atmosphere, the genuine locations, and the real people who populated the background of nearly every scene, proving that creativity and access to authentic environments can sometimes be more valuable than a massive Hollywood budget when trying to capture a specific time and place on film.